I am absolutely thrilled to welcome back Cece Sykes. She first spoke with us a few months ago and introduced our group to internal family service or systems. Today she's returning to continue that exploration and to tell us about her new book. And it's entitled Internal Family Systems, IFS in parentheses, Therapy for Addictions, which was just released last month. Cece, it's really terrific to see you. I can hardly wait to hear what you have to say. Please go ahead. Thank you and welcome. And I might have to.
You got it.
Thank
you, Susie. And thank you, Patrick, for inviting me in. You know, I have to say, I'm already just moved a little bit just to sit here with you, to look around. I see a couple familiar faces and of course, some new ones. And just the set-aside prayer. I love the set-aside prayer. I don't know if I know the set-aside prayer, but I need to know the set-aside prayer. I don't have to set aside every day. I do. So I'm very touched by that. Also, I feel like introducing myself this way too, to say I am a grateful, not current, but former member of Al-Anon. I went to 12-step for 8 or 9 or 10 years, very regularly. Had a beautiful sponsor I stayed in touch with for 30 years, and I needed it. Needed it bad. And so it's a super accident that I became a psychotherapist. Just the fact that everyone, my family was filled with addictive processes everywhere I looked, in my extended family, has nothing to do with the fact that I became a psychotherapist for my profession. That's, of course, sarcasm at its maybe not finest. So I come to this meeting, I come to this work, I come to discuss what my thoughts and the IFS model and the book with you with great humility. It's taken me, my life in a way to continue to form my own thoughts, heal my own heart around what I think will help me and others when we love someone and they are suffering and hurting themselves. And this central question has really been the issue of my life. So there's the issue of how do I love myself when I'm hurting myself, and I'll discuss that too. But I suspect that for everyone here, you have had your own journey around healing your own relationship with substances or other practices. And I suspect you might know 1 or 2 people and have loved 1 or 2 or 10 people who also have suffered in certain ways. And so in a sense are holding both your own journey and then your journey with the people that you know and love as they do or do not pursue healing and recovery. So what I'm here to discuss today is the internal family systems model and how I've applied. You have some ideas about how to apply that model to working with people who are impacted by addictive processes. I mostly teach other therapists, but we therapists, again, have our own journeys in different ways. And so I always invite every therapist to think about this. So when I begin out, and I'll say it to you guys too, I begin most of my workshops and trainings by saying, what happens to you inside when I say the word addict? And I just invite, even in this moment, if you're up for it, just to notice the reaction in your own system. Maybe some recoil, by the way, I don't use that word professionally. I say it to trigger us because it's powerful and because it attaches to the stigma that's out there around that. And so guess what? That stigma's in us and around us. So when I'm working with therapists, I want therapists to sort of feel into their own reactions, which is often based on their own story and experiences. And I invite all of us here in this space who have chosen to pursue a healing process, for yourselves, to just notice, what goes on for you around that. So, and this is what I think the internal family systems model, this is what I want, how I want to use the internal family systems model when I'm working with clients and when I'm training other therapists, which is I want to help us look at the complexity of these issues. And I'm not here to endorse someone who's using, I'm not here to encourage it, of course, but I'm here to build a relationship with the parts of someone engaged in this behavior. And you know, as well as I do, there is more to all of us than what we're doing when or how we're using people, places, and things, or how we're using practices and substances. So let me show you a little bit about IFS. Do you guys, you can either wave at me or send up a little signal or something, because I think the chat is off. How many of you guys know something about IFS? Just if it's a yes, wave at me. Okay, a decent amount. And so let me see, do I have more than one screen up? Yeah, I do. Is there more than one screen? Sure, there is. Any more waves? Yeah. Okay, well, everybody's got, you don't have out on the camera, so that's fine. So, all right, well, I'm going to do some basics and just tell you the basics and then why I think it's really useful. And then I want to hear your comments and your observations, okay? Some of you guys are IFS people, beautiful. Okay, I'm going to share the screen. As I share the screen, I'll tell you that the internal family systems model was originally developed as a psychotherapy model here in Chicago by Richard Schwartz. And he is trained, his PhD is actually in family systems. So he was doing a lot of work with family systems, which is really about how to work with families so that parents don't polarize and stay in battle with each other over a child. The basic core assumption of family systems, meaning if in a traditional hetero family, if mom says A and dad says B, what does child do? C, whatever they want. And while doing it, they're both neglected by the battle, while these two battle, and they're often scapegoated. So the child does. So many of us may have been that child and may have been one of those parents. But the idea being that when you go into the system, you want to help the parents not polarize, not one be soft, one be hard, but work together. And from that joint place, not having to agree on everything, but from that joint place, welcome the child and make space for the child and their needs. If this is going on, the child's needs are neglected. That basic idea is being translated into the inner world. And I want to describe to you what I mean by saying that. All right. What the heck? What do I want? No, I want this. Close that. Okay, open this. All right. Okay. All right. So these are the most boring slides in the world. They're filled with mostly words. Just to say, if that bothers you, just, turn off your, you don't have to watch them. In the model, there are a couple of basic assumptions, and it's really important. I'll describe them to you through the work of healing and working with people with addictive processes. It's the idea that everyone has a self. That what does that mean? It means that everyone has the capacity, maybe not in any given moment, but the capacity to find a place of serenity, for instance, to sort of witness ourselves, to be calm and observant of our own process, and to have that little inner voice of wisdom. It doesn't mean that we're listening to it. It doesn't mean that we even want to always listen to it. But I believe that no matter how much trauma someone's been through, no matter how long their story is, how crazy their family still is, how their life is still chaotic, I hold within them that they have the essence of the ability to heal inside and the desire to heal inside. Parts of them aren't ready. Got it. But I believe that the desire to be whole and heal is in every person I meet. The second place is multiplicity, which leads to that second idea, which is that we are all made up, in this model we call subpersonalities or parts. By that we mean that what you think, what you say to yourself when you wake up in the morning, what you do, how you get through the day, the way that you soothe or resource yourself, and your vulnerability vulnerable feelings, sensitivities, pains, trauma, past memories, good memories, bad memories. This all, we think of these as just different aspects or parts of who you are. And the reason we call them, identify them separate from one another is because in the model, what we do is we learn how to connect to each one. That doesn't sound as overwhelming as it is, although occasionally, of course, we can feel overwhelmed. But we learn that there's patterns in the ways that we operate. And when we begin to notice our patterns and how our parts fit into a pattern, where there's a lot of healing involved with that. And the main thing that's good about what we believe about parts is that every part has a positive intention. Even if it's engaged in a negative or not helpful or a very fragile state, we know that it's trying to accommodate to something. And so we start from how are you trying to help? And what are your fears in not helping in this way? The third piece of this is that the inner world of the psyche is a system, any entity whose parts relate to one another in a pattern. That's a systems definition, not an IFS definition. What that says is that you and me, we have inner sort of alliances and inner polarities. Like a part of me wants to do more workshops and a part of me thinks I have to work less. A part of me is very worried about my daughter who moved to Brooklyn, who's seeing her former husband, who I hate, just to say a little bit, I hate him. No, maybe a lot. I mean, I have a part that hates. And another part of me says, stay in it, say something. Another part of me says, she's an adult, leave it be. I hold them both, right? So both of these parts are part of me, right? And underneath all that is my vulnerability, my fear for her, my fear for what could happen, etc. So when we work in IFS, we work with all different parts of the system with the idea that we can build a relationship with them. Self is sort of like the sun behind the clouds, how some days you think there is no sun. Now, right now in Chicago, there's no sun. And it went from 80 to 30 and it snowed today. But the sun that doesn't mean just because we can't see the sun and we cannot feel the sun does not mean it's not there. And just because I can't see or feel that wisdom and that inner desire to heal, I can't see it in this moment with my client, I still know it's there. And I always know it's there. And my invitation is to help them begin to receive that and take that in as well. In the addictive system, if you will, sometimes the way self shows up is just the desire. Someone comes in chaotic, angry, frustrated, missing their appointments, forgets to pay, all the chaos that goes on. Life is chaotic. Like, do they really have a self? Really, Cece? I'm not seeing it. I'm not feeling it. But where that really shows up is in the desire to be whole. Anybody who shows up at a meeting and anybody who shows up at a treatment and anybody who shows up in a psychotherapist's office at least has parts of them that want something different. Even if other parts of them are, practically drove away and were late because they're sitting in their car and they don't want to come in. That's there too, no problem. But I'm always listening for both, right? Not just one. Someone doesn't have to be, I'm all in order to get better. That's not really how we work. Also, even when people are very high or they're living a very, very altered life, most days are not really very present. They're kind of tranced out with whatever they're into. There can be real wisdom in those words. And it also means that I may see them after they've drank or used. I may see them for their psychotherapy session. I mean, if it's too much, I won't. But I don't, this whole thing about you have to go home because you're in your symptom. I don't tell depressed people to go home when they don't want to talk. I don't tell like totally anxious, overwrought people to go home because they're a little too nervous today. So they're just into their thing. So sometimes it doesn't work, of course, and we have to make some boundaries and we have to change some things. But I want to just start with this idea that the person who's struggling and suffering by using substances and practices is just another way to cope. And I want to look at them psychologically and not so differently from someone else. I think some of our reactions are quite punishing. as clinicians. So I'm always listening as a self-detector. I'm listening for the desire to be whole, even though parts of them are sabotaging them and getting them in their way. I don't have to say too much about this other than that every part has a positive intention. By that, I mean my part that wants to reach out to my daughter and tell her what to do has a positive intention to be helpful, to save her from more pain, et cetera, et cetera. It has a helpful intention for me, wants me to be the best parent and the best possible mother, et cetera, et cetera. And my part that's to stay out of it. This is her life. She has not asked you for any help about this. Wants to respect her boundaries, wants to, respect my own inner world, which is a little dysregulated around that at times, and doesn't want me to unload my stuff onto her. So I kind of need both. I need parts of me that help me reach out at times, and I need parts of me that help me hold back and be more circumspect at other times. We need both. I'm not trying to get rid of either part of me. I just don't want one part. If I go with one part one day and one part the next, I'm making everybody crazy, myself most of all. So by listening to both, I can maybe make a decision that feels right for all of my system. So multiplicity is normal. So having all these multiple ideas, having a polarity inside, do it, don't do it, reach out, hold back, work hard, indulge yourself. All of these polarities are very, very stressful. They're normal. It's normal, but it's stressful. But here's where IFS, I think, offers us a lot of clarity. I like to chunk things down to the simplest common denominator. In this model, we chunk the entire human experience, if you will, all the aspects of the psyche, all of our different operations into 3 big categories. And their names are a little bit easy, managers, they're parts of us that create stability, even in the midst of heavy duty, you guys know, using just practices, just being involved, craziness, gambling, whatever, pornography. We have parts most of the time that continue in some way to function, perhaps not at our best. But I don't want to ignore all the ways in which someone's still trying to hang in and live life and do something normal or right. At the same time, their other parts are acting out. And so as a clinician, I want the people I'm working with to invite both sides of that person, the parts working well as I don't want to take an assessment. What is your drinking history? But it's interesting information. It may be information I need to have that will be useful. But there's other history involved, and not just trauma, also the ways in which this person has tried to get better before and the ways in which this person is still functioning well. So in IFS, we want to look at the managers who do okay, as well as the soothers who are struggling, as well as what we call the other side of the third part of this triangle, which is exiles. They're called exiles because it's the parts that we sort of repress or exile from our everyday consciousness. But to me, it is our shared humanity. We all have parts of us. It's normal. It's healthy. It is humane to be sensitive, to be trusting, to be carefree. I mean, how many of us were told, you're too trusting, you're too sensitive, right? This is what our message is to children. Well, no, we were not too trusting. The wrong people, adults exploited us or exploited our trust or weren't untrustworthy. That is not the child's fault to trust. Being sensitive, which means to know what we feel and care how other people feel, is the essence of our humanity. So to feel when other people are hurting, to feel our own pain is the essence of what helps us stay in humanity. So what happens to those sensitive, open-hearted, trusting parts of us, if someone has neglected us, if there are attachment wounds and losses due to divorce, due to people leaving because they're imprisoned, people leaving and just disappearing, to other kinds of trauma and exploitation, abuses, what happens is those parts end up starting believing certain things about themselves, like, this must mean I'm bad. You try to make sense of it the best you can. And most of us children make that sense of it by blaming ourselves. So we become burdened with negative ideas about who we are. And this, all of us have some of those. Nobody can escape childhood having been perfectly attuned to. Doesn't happen. In addition to which, we can be heard in schools, people who are in marginalized communities, they're people of color, LGBTQ community, anybody who's marginalized. English isn't your first language, neurodiversity, all of these things. You can get hurt in schools, you can get hurt in the culture, you can get hurt in the justice system. You can be just discriminated against, bullied, any kinds of difference, if you will. These are all any kind of marginalization that we've experienced also makes us more susceptible to getting involved in addictive processes. Why? Because they're trying to soothe their pain. So, all right. This is just a map. We don't have to get into the whole thing, but the idea being that it's okay to have parts of us that help us escape. Firefighters and distractors just have too much to escape from because there's too much underneath that's painful. We need managers that stabilize and improve us, but sometimes we also become very hard on ourselves. I don't know if I've ever worked with anyone in recovery who didn't have critics, judgment, contemptuous part toward themselves, toward the parts of them that acted out. We don't say, I hate myself. In IFS, we break it down. We say, okay, your critics and your judges hate the parts of you that have been into porn and drinking, or food and drinking, or drugs and drinking and sex. They hate those parts. And the exiles, they listen, like at the child listening to two parents fighting. There's something wrong with you, though there isn't. The exiles inside just start to feel more and more shame as that battle goes by. The battle between managers, get better, get back on track, get over yourself. Firefighters, I need a break. I need to get out of here. This is too much for me. And I deserve this. That's another part of us. Firefighters sometimes watch for what we know what we've lost. In some kind of way, they're trying to fill those gaps. They called them, Richard Schwartz, he called them firefighters. He says they put out the fires of shame. And that's what their real intention is. And they're heroic in the sense that they get a lot of negative feedback from managers and outside the world, in the outside world. What do I want to say? I'm going to skip some of this. And just to say, well, I'll go to definitions. For me, I don't really use the word addiction very much. I mean, I do because we need to know what we're talking about, but I think of it as a process, not really a state. A process that took a while to develop in the person, and it's okay for it to take a while to heal. So for me, it's an addictive process. And a definition to me of an addictive process is actually a chronic polarity, meaning a battle, an internalized battle between two teams of extreme parts, critical controlling managers, because by the time we're using every day, we also hate ourselves every day, and avoidant, soothing firefighters who are getting more and more needing to take more or do more to escape. And it's escape, control, soothe, get on track. This polarity goes on and on. And they're both trying to keep us from feeling what's underneath. Old trauma, new trauma, attachment wounds, feeling alienated, this kind of stuff that if we don't, we need help. We've always needed help to process it. Children are supposed to have someone help out in that process. And if we don't, if I say, if no one else is making you safe and protecting you, you will find your own protectors. You will protect yourself. Managers protect us in a certain kind of way, doing good, and also criticizing ourselves in a certain way to try to stay on track. Firefighters protect us by giving us some soothing and a way out. They both protect, but in sort of opposite ways. So for me, when I'm a clinician, I'm not just working with, I use too much. I have to work with all that perfectionism, all that inner hostility, all the contempt that managers have, as well as creating some safe ways to connect to old pain. So I'm working that triangle. I'm working all the way around with every person because each part of that person benefits from healing. Every treatment program says, and many, many are good. I'm not trying to say they're good, but everyone says we treat the whole person. Of course. I like IFS because it says the whole person is complex and there's a lot to look at. And I like that we have a way to look at that. Gabor Mate, who I'm sure you've heard of, says basically addiction and addictive processes are pain medication. They're coping with trauma. He's done a good job of getting out in a sort of a global message of connecting people who've been very, very stuck and very, very in very, very extreme straits with using various kinds of processes and substances and connecting it to very, very extreme kinds of trauma. And what I want to say is I don't want it to have to be extreme for us to say that to use is still to take care of pain. Maybe it's this much pain and this much pain. Maybe your story has, had sort of a functional family and everybody was sort of okay. And of course, people were mean sometimes. And then there was that divorce later on, but there wasn't anything totally chaotic. But that doesn't mean that there still wasn't some pain and some loss. So sometimes some people say to me, well, here's a polarity. On the one hand, we have to look for the trauma. And on the other hand, we don't know what my client's story is. So I've had clients who've never been asked about their trauma, and I've had clients say, I'm sick of people asking me if I was sexually abused because I feel even worse because I wasn't, and I'm still out there. I was still out there doing stuff, right? So that's a polarity, which is the way to go. The thing is to stay curious. We don't know. There's a doctor in the States, he's worked with 25,000 people recovering from opiates. He says addiction shouldn't be called addiction. It should be called ritualized compulsive comfort seeking. And he believes in using medication to help people. He believes in helping people look at their stories from when they were young as a way to normalize how they ended up using PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. He says to be reactive to severe trauma is not a disorder, where we all would react and do react to trauma and stress. So it's not disordered to react to it. We just need more options. I like this definition: dependence or commitment to a practice, habit, or substance to the extent that cessation causes trauma. That gives me respect. I'm not just going to jump up here. I always say to the therapist, I'm going to take away your cell phone, everybody, for like an hour and a half. Now what happens to you when I say that? I'm going to take away your favorite food right now, never again. Everyone's like, what? When we go in and tell someone, this is, I'm going to tell you what you have to do to get better. I understand that it doesn't look like they know what they're doing, and I get that. But there is if I believe there's a reason why this person is engaging in this behavior, I really am not here to take it away without offering something else instead. Anything we lie about. That's Ann Milson Shaver. I love that one. Can be anything. How much did those boots cost? I got them on sale. Whatever we're lying about, it relates to some kind of process. We have a part that did it. We have a part that wants to hide it. And then we have a part that has some kind of shame, even if we shouldn't, or don't even know I have shame. There's some shame in there. So always looking around, a lie takes all three parts of the system, every lie. The thing that we did, the thing that doesn't want it to be, parts that don't want it to be seen, and whatever shame we had that may have, or pain that may have caused us to do it, and shame around exposing it. All right, I think I'm going to put compulsive, done without thinking, compulsive. I felt like I had to, ignoring consequences. And I just want to say, this is my last slide, then I'll pause. I know, I don't have to show you ACE scores. You guys know. You know how much is going on out there. All right, this is the short triangle. Blaming, flaming out, and shame. Keep it simple. And my last thing I'm going to say, so when I'm trying to view this, when I'm trying to talk to therapists about it and talk to the people that I work with about it, my whole goal and the book that I wrote, the intention is to get out of that polarity between controlling and fighting with the using, or fighting with the using, fighting with the addiction, or fighting with the person with the addiction. Instead, building a relationship with. My goal is to build a trusting relationship with my client. That doesn't mean I'm here to encourage. I'm here to, you tell me, what's your vision? What do you want? One part of you wants this vision, one part wants something else. All right, let's listen to your visions. But there's some reason why you're coming here. Let's go back to that. So I say to people, I'm not here to take what you're doing away from you. You're telling me that you want to continue to not use, or you're telling me this is my goal. I support your goal. But I don't have that kind of control anyway. So just to be honest, but what I am here to do is support you achieving your goals, which I can do. So I'm not here to change you, although you may be able to change different behaviors that you have through our work together. I always say, when a client, like my woman yesterday, when she found her, the part of her that and was able to connect to the woman in her 30s, early 40s who drank, needed to drink. We asked that part, how have you tried? I said, ask her how she has a sense of how she was trying to help you. And her answer was profound. She said, well, she was trying to help me because she was worried about, about my worries about being a mother. My worries about, was I a good, I didn't know how, all my anxiety about being a wife, the shame and the wound around my birth, some of what happened in my childhood. And I'm not even saying it just half as eloquently as she did. I mean, but what I always say is the parts of us that are using have wisdom in them. They're creating chaos. There's a lot of pain there. I'm not questioning that. But when we really listen, I say they know what's happening in the rest of the system. They know that our manager parts are caretaking every day and totally ignoring our own needs or overworking just to get somebody's approval. And all we do is approval seek. And that's painful. They know that our exiles have never really been tended to. When I say to people sometimes, when you were little, someone saw a sad look on your face, they were supposed to follow you to your room and sit down with you next to you on your bed and look you in the eye and talk to you until they found out how sad you were and what was going on for you. And they're like, well, that never happened to me one time in my life. I'm like, I know. But in IFS, we go back to those places where that we can still connect. When someone tells me a story like that, I say, can you see that little one on the bed? When no one came? Yes. We can go back and listen to those parts. So it helps us understand developmentally how we were neglected or as lonely or holding shame for many years. And then when we finally found something that made us feel better, we wanted more of it. People say, when people tell me a story like, well, I had my first drink and I felt so much better. I say, who wasn't feeling good before that? Who wasn't feeling good? When I started using, I could finally turn off my brain. What was your brain saying to you before you turned it off? Right? So we're just looking at the different parts and how that all works together. There is far more to the parts of us that have been involved in using practices, using substances than meets the eye. And I think as clinicians, I think we can do better to help people to listen, to hear the complexity of those stories. And I think that we can do more to respect the inner knowing of each and every person around how they got here.